name is Stefan Duerst. I am currently located in Godfrey, Ontario, Canada, which is located right in the triangle between Ottawa, Montreal, and Toronto. And I live in the country, and I have my shop on the same property where I'm living, which is very convenient. And I'm surrounded literally by the Canadian wilderness. I got formally trained in Germany. I did a 3-year apprenticeship as an artist, blacksmith fabricator, which I finished with distinction. After that, I worked 2.5 years as a journeyman under my main master, Herbert Elflein, who was a highly accomplished master blacksmith, who was trained extensively in the epochs. So in the Renaissance, and especially in the Baroque and Rococo style. And so I worked for him under 2 years, and then I went to master trade school myself for 1 year, part-time, that I did at the same time as I had my own business going, which I finished as well with distinction. And then I received the certificate of a master artist blacksmith fabricator, and I opened my studio up in Munich, Germany, actually. And then I moved to Canada 2 years later and opened my shop here.
You also studied with Julia Mangold?
Julia Mangold, yes. So while I was in Munich, Germany, I as well worked for several other fabricator shops, actually, and other artists. And one of the artists was Julia Mangold, who is a well-established, at that time she only did steel sculptures, and I had the chance to work under her in creating some of the pieces for her. And obviously, while working for her, I really got exposed to because she does highly minimal work, to the importance of perfection. You know, like you want these objects to be really, because they're so minimal, you want them to be exact, because you will see everything. Obviously, there is always a component in these pieces that has a let's call it hand-created quality to it, because they're handmade. But by continuously and repetitive doing these kind of pieces, it really taught me how to be exact and how to literally pull off minimal forms, actually, as a matter of fact, which in my work that I'm doing myself right now, which is very organic and very flowing, I can use this extensively, because there's always a danger that this just becomes too much. There's just too much going on. And this way, I feel I can do very organic forms and shapes that still have a certain clarity, and there are still clean lines within a piece. And this is something I really picked up from Julia while working under her.
developed a very unique style. How did you arrive to this particular
So
style?
with the ribbons, and I'm actually currently just developing a new kind of line within that ribbon style, I call it. It is a very organic but still very minimal shape. At the same time, while working under my old master, Herbert Elflein, what I really picked up from him is that that you can do literally everything and any shape you want, as long as you have the technical background to do that. And obviously that requires years of training. He was at a point where he literally was able to do things, and I witnessed that in person, that really didn't make sense. Like, you shouldn't be able to do what he did with metal, but somehow he did, because he had, decades of experience, and he had an extremely creative and imaginative mind, and he was able to do really anything he wanted to do. He was able to do in one way or another. That's what I picked up from him. So with the ribbons, because he did a lot of, again, Rococo-esque work. If you look at certain Baroque and Rococo gates or fence installations, you will see that there is like almost like a fabric, like fabric in the wind, styled kind of forged metal that looks like a ribbon. So it doesn't look like metal really anymore. And this is kind of where I got the head start on my ribbons. And as well, I'm very drawn to the to Art Nouveau, because if you look at the blacksmith history during the Industrial Revolution, where they were able to cast many shapes and styles, extremely cost effective, the art of blacksmithing basically died out. Art Nouveau kind of brought that back, because in Art Nouveau they did shapes that you were not able to cast, so they flipped the whole thing around. And I like obviously that little historical detail, and because they kind of reinvented the art of blacksmithing. And the organic shapes, because steel inherently gets associated with being very rigid, very structurally sound, and by heating it actually up and hot forming it, it almost becomes like butter. It's kind of an exaggeration, but it becomes very malleable, and you can change the cross section and the shape of metal while it's hot. So in Art Nouveau, they did this a lot, and they created extremely organic shapes that are very clearly related to nature, often in a somewhat abstract form. And I'm personally very drawn to that. So the Art Nouveau, the historical background of Art Nouveau, with the flowing shapes, in conjunction with the technical finesse and maximum skill that the blacksmith had during the Rococo epoch, both these components mixed together kind of started me on these ribbon shapes. As well, on top of that, and this is especially in my earlier ribbon forms, I was introduced to Dr. Seuss children's books, which in Germany I didn't really came across too much, but here, reading it to my own children, I came across his art, and I was just blown away. So I brought this into the whole ribbon shapes as well, like the colorfulness, the playfulness, the kind of abstract organic shapes. And I'm very drawn to that, because that's kind of quite mirroring my own self, almost, I would say. So I'm very playful, but at the same time because I'm German, I can be very rigid as well. And obviously, especially in the bigger ribbon forms, there is always some engineering almost that you have to be careful of in order for the whole sculpture to be still structurally sound. So this is kind of where the ribbon shapes kind of originated from. While I was growing up in Germany in the 70s and 80s, I for whatever reason, was always drawn to Canada. I had books about the wildlife, about the landscape, the nature, the wilderness. And when I was 18, during my school holiday, I backpacked via Greyhound from Toronto to Vancouver, to the West Coast. And I was just mesmerized and blown away by the space that is available here, and just by the spaceness in general. In Germany, we don't have that much space that is uninhabited by people. There's always someone there, or a little village, and so on. In Canada, it's just so, there's just so much vast space, it's incredible. So when I was 18, I was experiencing that firsthand. And then in 2002, I immigrated to Canada with my partner at that time. And my vision as a teenager, or not as a teenager, actually, during my apprenticeship in Germany, actually, was always to have my own workshop within that Canadian wilderness. And that's ultimately what happened. So right now I'm on 60 acres here, where you could get lost technically, and I built my shop here. And when I look out the shop door, I see nature. And because my form and my style is very organic to begin with, I get naturally influenced by whatever I see on a daily basis. And this is never ending, this inspiration. And I always say nature really always has it already figured out, because clearly it has. So I'm very fortunate that I am surrounded by that. while I was working away here at my shop, I'm very productive, so I produce a lot of work, a lot of commissioned work, and a lot of work on spec, because I have an idea that comes to mind and I want to see it, and then I just do it. And I was accumulating quite a bit of work. And for my own pleasure, I guess, I created trails throughout the property here, and I just put pieces along the trail, and that naturally brought the idea to me that I should open that to the public so other people can experience this, not only the Canadian nature, but as well art while they're walking along those trails. So since 3 years, I officially closed the sculpture park. At the same time, people are still invited to come here and experience my shop. You know, I give people a tour of my shop, and I just put up actually more sculptures, just not along the trails anymore, but just in close vicinity to my shop. So people can still come here and they can walk around the barn, you know, and the shop and experience those sculptures. I currently have maybe 30 pieces, medium to large scale. They're on show right now outside my shop, and I always have sculptures within my shop as well.
So this is my latest piece from the communication series. It's Kommunikation number 14, and I added another component of communication between the piece itself and the viewer, because it's actually interactive. So the viewer itself can pick up those 4 modules and can easily move them and change them, and by doing so, he or she can create their own sculpture. And so they can literally have a different sculpture every single day.
You also have a strong international presence. Some of your items, some of your art is at the National Metal Museum in Memphis. Can you talk about that?
Yeah, the piece for the National Metal Museum in Memphis, Tennessee, I came across the invitation or an open call for artists. This must have been in 1998, around this time. And I was very drawn to the topic or the theme, which I feel had something to do with transformation or metamorphosis. And within my work, that is a big topic as well, because in order to create the shapes of steel that I do, just the process itself is a process of transformation, because I take a piece of steel and I heat it up, and obviously there is a transformative process within the metal just by heating it up, and then by manipulating it into the shapes and forms that I have in mind. There is another manipulation, and the metal itself gets transformed from a very rigid piece of literally straight, flat steel into these very organic shapes. So I was very drawn to the topic, and then I had the idea of introducing some blacksmithing techniques within that piece, which was mortise and tenon and some curving of the metal while it's hot. And I had a piece of basically a square that slowly transforms into a circle, all within a cubic meter. My collection is correct. And I really like this piece. It's one of my favorite pieces because it not only shows the transformation from a square to a circle as a shape, like the sculpture itself, but within the cross section of the metal. So all the pieces at the square are actually square, and the pieces that form the circle are actually round. And there are transition pieces that connect the square and the circle, and they slowly transform from a square where they connect to the square slowly to round where they connect to the circle. So I proposed that piece and I was accepted, and then I created it in my shop at the time in literally downtown Germany, which was a amazing setup, and shipped it over to Memphis.
A normal day in the life of a blacksmith. What's it like? What do you do?
Well, the normal life as a artist, blacksmith, sculptor, it depends. Usually I have some commission work on the go. I like to get up early. So like this morning I was in the shop at a little late. I was in the shop at 6:30. I like getting up with the sun, especially in the spring and summer. In the winter I start a little later, so I'm kind of following a little bit the nature, what's going on in nature. But in the spring, summer, I like to start early, get a head start, and I don't really plan too much anymore what I make that day in the shop, because I have a schedule of certain projects when they need to be done. And then, because I've been doing it for so long, I usually know what I have to do that day to progress. And usually if I don't worry about it anymore either, because when I'm in the shop and when I need the information, it usually comes to me. And then I just go ahead. So if there is, let's say, if there is a problem that you know, the evening before, or when I stopped working, I wasn't really sure how to continue. If I go back the next day in the shop, I usually find a solution, and something comes to me. And this is the way I work with my sculptures as well. I don't really draw too much anymore. Like if I have an idea and I want to sketch it down, sure, I'm going to sketch it down. But for certain projects, I just start the project, and as I'm working on it, the metal itself, or the the process itself, kind of reveals it to me, and I'm okay. Now I'm gonna go down this route, or maybe I go down that route. But it's not a logical process anymore. It's more maybe intuitive, you want to call it. It's very free flow, which makes sense because the pieces itself are very free flow. I always love teaching. Like I'm very drawn to teaching, and teaching is when I teach, maybe it's an unusual teaching style, but I don't really see myself as a teacher because I really don't, in the big picture, I really don't know anything, to be honest. All I can do is just share my experiences. And while I'm doing it, I'm always open for other people's experiences, because maybe there is a better way to do it, or a different way to do it, that maybe opens the door to another shape or form. So, but I'm very drawn to sharing the experiences, and I was approached by Sir Fleming College in Halliburton to be part of the artist blacksmith program faculty there. And I teach between 2 and 4 weeks every semester there, which I immensely enjoy. Gives me a lot of pleasure, and the students are great. They're usually very receptive. So I do that, and I used to teach out of my shop in Munich, Germany. I taught basic blacksmithing classes there. I taught workshops out here in Godfrey as well, which I still do by request. It's not something I advertise anymore because I'm pretty busy with commissions and doing my own pieces, but I still do it. But every year still I go to Fleming and teach there. I taught many children. I introduced them to the art of blacksmithing, which is almost my favorite, because they're really they're really open. They're just so open. A child's mind is very open still, and I love seeing what it does to people, not only children, if they grab a piece of metal and they heat it up and they're able to change the shape of it, which is amazing. Obviously, the more experience you have, the different shapes you can do and so on. But it's not rocket science, right? Really, only rocket science is rocket science, and even that. So it's really beautiful to watch people experience that, and see how that changes themselves. Because another aspect of metalwork that I was introduced by my very dear friend Steve, he pointed out the alchemical aspects of metalwork, which is true, because in previous times the blacksmith was like an alchemist. The blacksmith was able to grab a piece of steel and, for example, harden it, which is a molecular process, but they had the knowledge to do that. And hundreds of years ago, like in the medieval times, and even before that, this was magic. Like, he was a magician, because it was unbelievable for people to watch that. And the blacksmith had that information. So the blacksmith traditionally always was a magician and an alchemist. And I always tell people that when you work with metal, basically you do an alchemy, but not only to the metal, but to yourself as well at the same time. And when you watch, and I talk with this a lot about people that are in the workshops, when you watch and observe yourself, what you do with the metal and how you do it, and what you do not do with the metal, it tells a lot about yourself. And once you're aware of that, then you can literally change aspects about yourself, which have really nothing to do with the metalwork per se. And ultimately you can really kind of change your life and do your own inner alchemy. I don't know if that makes any sense, but that's a very big aspect of the metalwork practice as well.
Do you do restorations, or do you work with scrap metal or things like that?
While I was learning under my old blacksmith master Herbert Elflein in Achrhein, which is near south of Munich, near Garmisch-Partenkirchen, I was exposed to restoration work, yes, on a regular basis. Myself here in Canada, I do not do a lot of restoration work. It's not something I emphasize these days. I'm right now more interested in creating new pieces of art, functional and non-functional, and really to kind of maybe express myself through that kind of metalwork. Saying that, the techniques that I learned from the especially from the restoration or the restorative practices and techniques, I can use these techniques and create a very contemporary piece of art based on these restoration techniques. And I think this is where I'm maybe able to span the gap between a tradesperson and a fine artist, because I have this extensive training in how to shape and manipulate and treat primarily steel. I'm able to create maybe shapes that other artists are not able to do. Like all of my work has some hot forming processes to it, which a lot of artists don't do because you just have to learn these techniques. So rather than only relying on fabrication processes like cutting, cold bending, grinding, welding, I'm able to add techniques such as heating up the metal, hot bending. I'm working with forging equipment like power hammers, hydraulic presses, twisting machines, and so on. I can create very different shapes that you cannot create without the heat. So, and at the same time, because of that, I can bridge the gap between the craft and the art.
Offered you the space that you longed for. However, what do you miss about Germany?
What do I miss about Germany? It's a very good question. I miss the German bread, the pretzels, and the mountains. The mountains, it's one thing that I miss. I know we have mountains on the west coast here in Canada, obviously, but I do miss the mountains. And although I have the space here, which really changes your whole perception and your whole mind, sometimes, ironically, what I do miss is maybe that there is no space, because if you have less space, automatically what it does, there's more order, more organization, I call it, and maybe more structure. Here in Canada, because there's so much space, and I'm not talking about house organization or something, just the mindset. It's less structured, is more open, more expansive, which is amazing. These are all great aspects that show in my work. Sometimes I miss maybe the, how else to put it, maybe the more structure, more guidance somehow, maybe more stability, which is very easy, obviously, to have in such a small space. Here in Canada, where it's such a vastness, the mentality, and I see it in my own mind how that changed. You have to create it yourself here, because there's no need for it really, because everything is so vast. This is kind of more a philosophical explanation of that. So I hope I'm able to kind of transmit that idea. But yeah, that's in regards to the space, yes.
Did you experience what some people say or call culture shock?
It's funny you mentioned that, because technically I came from a Western civilization to a Western civilization. So one would not really expect a culture shock. And I would say I did not really experience it in the beginning. The only way I experienced it in the beginning, maybe again, and this maybe goes back to the vastness, Germans are very organized and very scheduled and very structured. And that may be a good thing and a bad thing. Who knows? In Canada, it's maybe a little bit less like this. And again, not so much on a personal level, but just the mindset. But I would say, since I had children, this is probably where I experienced the differences more, based on how these two different cultures deal with, let's say, education, parenting, violence, nudity, sexuality, more on these levels. I wouldn't say it's a culture shock, but these are definitely differences that I can experience here. And it's kind of funny, you would expect it almost to be the opposite, but it's not. Because Canada is so vast and, it's so open, you would think, more flexible mind and It can be actually the opposite. For example, let's say, like when I was growing up in Germany, we would go into the sauna once a week, So the aspect of nudity, it's completely natural, right? You would think in Germany, that are so, stereotypical, structured, organized, that it would be more narrow-minded there, but it's exactly the opposite. It's very open there. In Canada or North America, it's kind of more on the prude side, right? Which goes into the whole, how you raise your children and so on. But violence, on the other hand, is very well accepted in North America and Canada, which I find very interesting. Well, guiding philosophy, that is probably something maybe that I've been more aware again since probably 3-4 years. Again, introduced to by my friend Steve. It has more to do with, I would say, personal development. Again, the metal work is literally the way I use it is more like an internal mirror because of the alchemical properties of it. So it's more, and this goes back too with to the ribbon series. I'm actually collaborating with him right now on these ribbon series. And the name we've come up, or that he's come up so far, is Sword No Sword, which is based on a ancient martial artist. And basically, what this means is, or one aspect of it is that the true martial artist, the truest martial artist, uses the sharpest edge of the sword on himself, which means that there is 100% total self-reflection. And so, for example, to use this in a practical example, in order for me to being able to support myself and my children being a blacksmith, I have to not only create work that people want or that they commission me, but obviously I have to be a businessman, which when I started as an artist blacksmith, the emphasis was too much on the artist, and the business aspects of it, I didn't pay too much attention to it. I still was able to support myself to a certain degree, but not very well. And looking at your own faults, I call it, without being judgmental or beating yourself up, looking at these faults, then you're able to to change yourself and work internally. This is all internal work, and then change certain things around externally. For example, restructure the business or really treat it as a business rather than a hobby. So it's more like psychological. So maybe the guiding philosophy is really being open-minded to my own faults, and even if this has nothing to do, let's say, with a metal sculpture, it does, because somehow it transfers into my work, obviously, because my work is kind of me. So whatever is going on within me is going on within my work as well. So because the metal work is external, and I'm internal, so it's just an expression. Yeah, that was another good point, actually. It's an expression, right, of myself, which may create an impression on someone else. At the same time, if I look at my own work, right, which was expressive as one point, if I look at it, I can get an impression by my own words. So then this creates a cycle. And the same thing is with the psychological aspects of the whole thing. Then it becomes like a cycle and a circle, and ultimately you want it to be a spiral. So there's a movement in a certain direction. So maybe being open-minded, flexible, and being able to look at yourself in a non-judgmental way, maybe that's my guiding philosophy.
You have come a long way, and you have a long road ahead of you. How do you see the road ahead of you?
Well, like everyone else, I've come a long way. For me, it's 51 years in this lifetime. How long the road ahead of me is, I have absolutely no idea. You know, maybe I end this interview and have a heart attack. We don't know that. You know, I don't know. I don't hope so, but I'm trying to live with this understanding that I really do not know how much time I have left on this planet here. So thinking this, you know, helps me to really be grateful for what I have and for many things that I do not have at the same time. And so I don't really plan, you know, like I'm not planning my birthday in 40 years. I do not live like that. I live more really on a day-to-day basis. Saying that at the same time, I'm obviously still plan ahead to a certain degree because I run my own business. So there are certain decisions I have to make and certain scheduling of the work ahead, certain exhibitions, certain commissions, and so on. But I don't really have any expectation if this is like linear or if it's more curvy or if it's an up and down. It's not really something I think about, because if I think about it, it's almost like I'm wasting time and energy, because the time I would spend thinking about it, I could already use that time right now to help create the future that I want. So yeah, I don't really think about the future too much. I'm just more grateful that I'm still here today. Hopefully I come back tomorrow. And you know, I just really enjoy what I'm doing. I obviously immensely enjoy being around my children, seeing them grow up. I enjoy doing the work that I'm doing as a blacksmith. And yeah, that's really all. That's the way I kind of live.